Hey there, it's Emily with Cozy Clicks, and welcome to the Boost Your Portrait IQ online workshop. Now, in this 45-minute workshop, I will be teaching you the simple system for taking and editing beautiful portraits. Now, before we get started, I know your time is super valuable, and I want to make sure that this will help you and you are in the right place. So, who will this help? Well, if you are a new or intermediate portrait photographer looking for ways to make your portraits pop, this workshop will help you. If you've just recently started a new portrait photography business or you're thinking about starting one in the very near future, this workshop will help you as well. Or maybe you are just a parent who is looking for ways to take better pictures of their own kids. Then you know what? This workshop is for you too. All right, so now that we know that you are in the right place, I want to make sure that you have the best experience possible during this workshop. So I'm going to ask you to do a couple things for me. First, if you have any other windows open on your computer right now, make sure to close them out. So if you've got your email open or Facebook open in the background or you're streaming any videos or music, make sure to shut them down. That's going to help eliminate any distractions and help you focus on the content better. It's also going to help stream this workshop much more clear for you. Now, if at any time the sound does go out or the screen freezes up, try refreshing the page. That usually will help with the problem. Also, I emailed you some worksheets to help you follow along with the workshop today. So if you printed those out, you can get those out now. And if you didn't get those, or if you don't have them, simply a notebook and a piece of paper might come, and a pencil too, might come in handy. All right, I also have a freebie for you if you make it to the end of this workshop today. So I will tell you how to get your hands on the Portrait IQ Toolbox, which has additional resources for you. I have guides, checklists, worksheets, and more to help you continue to advance your knowledge in portrait photography. So if you'd like that Portrait IQ Toolbox, wait until the end and I'll tell you exactly how to get that. All right, for those of you who don't know me, this is me. My name is Emily Supio, and I'm the owner and author of the Cozy Clicks blog. So I'm guessing you have probably read one or two of my photography articles already. I have been a portrait photographer for quite some time now, and in addition to that, I've been an educator for well over a decade. I started teaching in the preschool classroom, and I have taught in just about every grade, and I currently am a part-time college professor, so I still am in the classroom. I'm also a wife and a mom to 4 wonderful children, and those kids are truly my inspiration for wanting to get better at portrait photography. Now, speaking of those 4 wonderful children, here is one of the 4. This is my daughter, Cosette, and this is a few years ago, but this is one of the first portraits I took of her when I was really trying to practice and concentrate on my portrait photography. Now, I've always had a background in art and photography, but not so much in portraits, so that area was new to me. And at the time, I thought this was a pretty good picture. But now that I have learned a little more, I can look back and say, it's not that great of a portrait. The shadows are very heavy and the highlights are harsh. And while she is super cute, it's just not really a good portrait. So what I did was practiced some more, trying to get better at taking pictures of my kids. And as I did this, my friends and my sister and my dad would tell me, you know what, you're getting really good. These are nice. I think people would pay for them. And the little gears in my head started turning, and I thought, you know what, I must be pretty good. People are liking what I'm doing. And I thought, you know what, maybe I could even start a portrait photography business one day. But I knew I had to learn. I knew in order to start a business, I really had to have things down a little more than I did. Even though people were liking it, I kind of had a nervous and scared feeling. And I just wanted to make sure I was on the right track and I was learning all I could. But as I attempted to learn more, instead of getting better, what happened was I felt very overwhelmed with all of just everything that's out there dealing with photography. Do you ever feel that way, that whenever you try to learn one part of photography, there's like 10 more things you have to learn in order to get to the place that you want to be? And I just was feeling like, I don't know if I can possibly learn it all. And when you think about it, there's light and white balance, exposure, your editing programs, your posing, your settings, reflectors, skin tones, memory cards. And these are just some of the things that you have to learn with photography. And just looking at this list right here kind of makes my head spin a little bit. So I'm guessing it kind of makes yours too. There's just a lot out there. It can be very, very overwhelming. So I wanted to try to drop that overwhelm a little bit, and I looked toward trying to be inspired. I looked for inspiration. I went onto Facebook and I went onto different photographers' websites, and I would look and I would see, what was I being inspired by, and what were the common things that I was seeing, and was I able to, replicate some of these things or take some inspiration and bring it into my own work. And I would do that, and I would look at their work, and instead of being inspired, I started to feel very down. I started to feel like I was comparing myself, and I was looking at these photographers that had great, beautiful portrait work, and I just started to think, you know what, people, my sister thinks I do a great job, but I'm nowhere near what these photographers are doing. And I thought, you know what, will I ever get to that level? Do you feel that way sometimes when you look at other people's work, like, oh my goodness, I just can't do it. I just don't know how I'll get to that level. And I want to kind of take that fear away from you, because I know you can. You can do it. You can get to the level that you want to be at with your portrait photography. Because for me, what happened was things started to come together when I stopped comparing myself, and when I really dropped the overwhelm and stopped trying to feel all those negative feelings and tried to get that excitement back again with portrait photography. And I found that there were things that I was doing over and over that worked, that I was making progress with, and I was getting better, and I started to see results in my own work, and I knew that I was doing something right. And when you look at this picture again, here's my little Cosette again, and that was the left side was my original, one of my first pictures, and then just a few years later, after I dropped that overwhelm and after I stopped comparing and just kept practicing on my own, I was able to create this picture of Cosette, which is on the right. So you can see there's a big difference in my progress here. And what made me feel really good was now it wasn't just my dad that was telling me that my pictures were looking great, but I had outside sources telling me as well. And I had a feature on the Huffington Post. I had the International Art website, Board Panda, named me the #1 family photographer in the state of Arizona. I was asked to write educational photography articles for Digital Photography School and for CG Pro Prints. And what I want you to know right now is that when you start putting all the right pieces together in the right order, your photos will start getting better. So when you can kind of clear your brain of all that overwhelm and know exactly what you need to focus on, and when you can stop comparing yourself to others, you're going to see progress. Okay, so right about now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, Emily, I get it, but where do I start? Where do I begin with this system for taking better portraits? And that's what I'm going to teach you right here. So we're going to be going over a system for portraits, what I like to call the 3-step system. So we're going to be going over the basics, or the first things you need to learn and work on to get better at your portraits. Then the creativity piece, or how to really make your photos have that wow factor. And then finally, another overwhelming part of portrait photography is the editing. So we'll go over some of the best tips and things you can do when editing your portraits. So the first thing we're going to focus on is just the basics. So what things should you be focusing on first with your portrait photography? Light is a big one, because you can take a great portrait using just natural light, and you don't even have to have a fancy camera to take a great portrait, as long as you understand light and how it affects your subject. So I'm going to go over one of my favorite ways to light my subjects in portrait photography, and that's open shade. So on the left-hand side is a cell phone picture that I snapped to show you exactly where my subject was placed in this picture. So you can see that she's standing in the solid shade that is created from the awning of this building. Now I have her feet right up against the line where the shade and the sun meet, and she's facing that direct sun. So the light is going to come over her very smooth and make it very flattering across her features. Now I'm standing in the full sun, so I'm directly in front of her in that sun, focusing on her. And you can see on my final portrait on the right side that she's very well lit. There's not heavy shadows or harsh highlights on her, and she has a very smooth light that goes over her face. It makes it very pleasing. So one great way to light your subject is open shade, just finding that solid shade to place your subject in while you're standing in that light source. Now, some things to look for with the light when you're placing your subject. Step back and look and see if the light looks smooth and flattering over them, just like in the photo I just showed you. Also look for catch lights or dramatic light, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. So catch lights are those little hints of white, those little sparkles that are in the eye caused by your light source. So once you place your subject, take a look right in their eyes and see if you can find the catch lights. So if you look at her in this picture, you'll see in the colored part of her eyes, she's got little hints of white. Those are the catch lights. If you have those, your picture is probably going to look pretty great. Now, earlier I said you want kind of a smooth light over your subject. If you'd rather have more dramatic light, you can do that too by positioning your subject at a 90-degree angle to the light source. So whereas in the picture I showed you before with the open shade, that was very smooth and that covered her face from a direct angle. This one here gives heavier shadows and highlights, but it still looks pleasing. This is because she's set at a 90-degree angle. Now, what to watch out for when you're lighting your subject? Like I said earlier, and I keep saying this, watch out for heavy shadows and heavy highlights. They will not look pleasing in your photo. And coming back to my little girl Cosette, you can see here both the highlights very harsh and the shadows are very heavy, and it's not dramatic lighting. This is just not pleasing, and it's not showing her features in the best light. All right, another basic part of photography that you want to focus on is focus, because you can have the cutest portrait ever, but if it is soft and out of focus, it's not going to look very good. So if you have a DSLR camera and you look through that viewfinder, you'll probably see something that looks kind of like this. Where you should start focusing is using that center focal point. That's generally going to give you the sharpest focus. Now, if you just have one subject, take that center focal point and aim it right at the eyes. When you can master getting the eyes sharp and clear and crisp, that's going to make your portrait look fantastic. If the eyes are soft or out of focus, that's not going to make your portrait look great. Now, if you have more than one subject, you're going to want to focus on the person that's closest to you. Focus will fall back, so you want to make sure who's ever nearest you is who you're focusing on. All right, let's talk just for a minute about manual mode, because I do think once you master manual mode, you have so much more creativity over your portraits. If you already know it, I'm going to go over briefly just a couple things that I think are most important. And if you're not quite comfortable with manual mode yet, in that Portrait IQ toolbox, I do have a manual mode guide for you that you'll be able to go over in more detail. But let me go over some of the most important parts about shooting in manual mode portraits. When you set your shutter speed, a great rule is to double the focal length of the lens. So for example, if you're shooting with a 50 millimeter, you're going to want to double that for your shutter speed. So I would go 1/100th at a minimum if you're shooting with a 50 millimeter. Now, for me, I like to go even a little bit over that. I like to go a little faster because I do shoot handheld and I do move quite a bit. So I want to make sure that I'm not shaking the camera too much. So if I was shooting with a 50 millimeter, I would go double and then maybe add some. So I might shoot maybe 1/200th for my shutter speed. Now, when you're setting your aperture for a portrait, if you want a nicely lit portrait with a nice blurry background, one of the best ways to do that is set your aperture very wide. So after you've set your shutter, set your aperture somewhere between 1.8 and 3.5 if your lens allows that. Now, like I said, if you're still a little unclear on manual mode, I do have a guide in the toolbox for you. If you are comfortable with manual mode, then you are on top of things. Now, lens choice is the next thing I want to cover because different lenses affect portraits differently. Your focal length of the lens that you choose will make a big difference in the way the person looks. I typically don't like to shoot portraits with a focal length of less than 50 millimeters. So when you're shooting your portrait, if you're shooting 50 millimeters or longer, that's going to make the features of the person you're shooting look more flattering. The shorter the focal lens, the more distorted the nose and the facial features will look. So I love the 50 millimeter, I love the 85 millimeter, and I especially love the 135 millimeter when shooting portraits. All right, let's move into the second part of this three-step system, and that is creativity. Getting creative when working with your composition. All right, let's talk for a minute about the rule of thirds, because that can really help you with your creativity in your composition. Now, when we talk about the rule of thirds, it's taking your photo and splitting it up into 9 sections, where at each of those intersections, that would be the most pleasing place to put your subject. So you can see here, this is a super cute photo, and she falls right in the 2 intersections. So you can see the forehead and just below her chin hit those intersections in the rule of thirds. So she is in a great spot for composition. But if you look at this, even though it's cute, it is a little bit boring. It's simple. There's not much going on with the composition in this photo. And when I started to look at that with my portraits, I kind of had what I call my aha moment when something hit me about the rule of thirds, and I hope I can explain this to you in a way that makes sense. So when we looked at that photo earlier, we were looking at it from a two-dimensional perspective, thinking of the photo as like if you had the photograph in your hand, that's like a piece of paper, 2D, and we just chopped it into the grid. But what if you think of your photo not as two-dimensional, but as three-dimensional, like this cube? Because when you take a photo of a person, they are three-dimensional. And we live in a three-dimensional world and not a flat world. So instead of just thinking of the rule of thirds like that flat grid, think of it more like a cube, where any of the intersections that you would see here would be a pleasing composition in your photo. Let me try to give you a better example of this. So if you take a look at this photo here, if we were to take that flat 2D grid and place it over here, my subjects would not fall on any of those intersections. They are right smack in the middle, which most people might say, well, it's not following the rule of thirds. But if we think of this like a cube, they actually fall a third of the way back into the photo, making it look more three-dimensional. And you can see that bottom arrow at the bottom left. You can see I had some of the grass and the bushes in front of them. Then they are behind those bushes. And then the arrow in the back at the top shows there's more behind them, showing depth. So even though they're not a third of the way over in a two-dimensional picture, they're a third of the way back, making the photo look more three-dimensional and giving it a lot more depth. You can see that in this picture too. So on this one, if we were to put that flat 2D grid over him, he probably would fall in one of those third intersections. But in this one, he also falls a third of the way back. So you can see at the bottom, there are flowers there on the bottom. Then he's a third of the way behind those flowers. And then there's more flowers and bushes behind him still, showing depth and dimension, which makes a photo look that much more creative and makes the composition that much more creative too. So when you're thinking about the rule of thirds, try to think of it more as a 3D image and less of just a flat paper picture. Now, to get even more creative, you want to think about your perspective. Now, I have a picture right here. Once again, super cute picture. But like most portrait photographers, this picture was taken just straight on. So she's got a super cute smile. She's got a cute little pose. She's up against a cool textured wall. But my perspective is just straight on. There's not much going on. There's not much to make it really creative. So I want you to think, when you're just taking a picture of someone straight on, how can you really change your position to get creative? Now, I took a picture of her against that same wall, but I thought, where can I move myself to make it different? And what I did was I just moved over. So I was taking a shot at a 90-degree angle from the wall instead of straight on at the wall. And it made my composition look more interesting. So now she's not right up flat against the wall, but I moved around to the side of her, making the composition of the photo, I think, more cool. Now, you can also move around so you're high, so they're looking up at you. You can also get low. And when I say low, I mean really low. In these pictures, I'm actually laying on the ground. My belly is flat to the ground, giving a whole new perspective to what the photo would look like. This is an especially helpful thing to do when you're working with younger kids, because you're getting right down at their level. Make sure just to move around to all sides. So really think differently. Don't just take a picture of your subject from right in front of them, but move around as many places as you can. So, the third and final piece of this three-step system to taking and editing better portraits is the editing piece. And I feel like when I said editing, I could almost hear the sighs of overwhelm because the editing piece is extremely overwhelming. If you open up any editing program, you're going to see so many buttons and sliders and tabs. It's very confusing what you should be focusing on. Now, there's a few main editing programs out there. You might be working with Photoshop, or you might use Lightroom or ACR, which is Adobe Camera Raw. Lightroom and ACR are very, very similar in the sliders and the tabs that they have available. They're almost exactly the same. Now, if you're wondering which editing program is right for you, the one that I use and my recommendation would be the Adobe Creative Cloud, which gives you Photoshop, it gives you ACR, and it gives you Lightroom. It is a monthly based software subscription, but I found it very well worth it. And if you are a serious hobbyist or you're thinking about starting a business, it's definitely the option that I would recommend. Now, in just a minute, I'm going to pull up my photo that we're going to edit together, but I want you to know that in order to do a couple of these techniques, you need to make sure you are shooting in RAW. So if you've been afraid to make that switch over to RAW, this is the perfect opportunity for you to switch over and practice today so that you can try some of these techniques with your RAW files. Now, in the editing video I'm going to show you in just a second here, there's 4 main sliders that we're going to work with. I'm going to pull up a photo in ACR, which is Adobe Camera Raw, but like I just said, if you work in Lightroom, all of these same techniques you'll be able to do in Lightroom as well. So let me switch over right here to my photo. Okay, so I have my portrait pulled up here in ACR, and I'm going to walk you through the 4 main sliders that you should be focusing on in the editing process. So the first one I want you to take a look at is your exposure slider, and you're going to find that one 1, 2, 3 sliders down on the right-hand side. Now, if you exposed correctly in camera, there's little that you're going to have to do here. But I know that most people, myself included, sometimes make mistakes and they might over or underexpose a photo while they're shooting. So it's important to double check this. Now, I can look at this photo and it does look slightly underexposed. It looks a little dark, and I can double check this by looking at my histogram, which is up here in the upper right-hand side. Now, if the curve of your histogram falls mostly to the left, your photo is too underexposed. Vice versa, if this curve fell mostly on the right-hand side over here, it would be too bright or overexposed. You want to try to aim to have most of that curve right here in the middle, which mine is not. So let's take this exposure slider and I'm just going to pull it over to the right, and let's see what happens. We can watch both the curve of the histogram and our photo and see what happens when we move that exposure over. So as I'm moving it slightly to the right, you see that my curve is in the middle, and you can see my picture brightening up, and that's already starting to look real nice. So I'm going to stop it right about there because it does look nice and bright, and I do see now that most of my histogram falls right in the middle. So I know that my exposure is on point. Now, the second slider we want to work on is the white balance or the temperature. And you can find that slider right here under your histogram. It's the very first one, and it's the slider that goes from blue to yellow. Because essentially what your white balance will do is make your photo cooler or warmer. So in order to check and make sure your white balance is correct, you're going to want to grab your white balance tool, which is located on the upper left-hand side. It's this third button over that says white balance tool. Now, just like exposure, while you're shooting, you can try to make sure that your white balance is on point. Some people use an Expo disc or use Kelvin. Either of those ways are awesome, but you still want to make sure that your white balance is on point, and you can do that real easy in your editing program. Now, with this tool that we just grabbed, we're going to want to sample a couple areas that are white or neutral. Now, this photo is nice because I see a nice white neutral area on his jacket. So we'll be able to sample from there. If there is not a white area or a white piece of clothing that your subject is wearing, you can always sample from the whites of the eyes or possibly even the teeth. All right, so our temperature slider is set at 4350, and that's how I shot the photo. It looks a little bit on the cool side to me, so as I sample some areas, let's watch this slider and see what happens. So I'm going to sample a neutral white area. So I'm going to pick maybe right about here and just click. And you can see that really warmed the photo up. And when I take a look at the slider, it went from 4350 to 5000. So it did slide over to the right and made a much warmer image. Now I want to double check this and just make sure that it is correct. So I'm going to sample at least one more point and see if I get a value around 5000. So let me just come over to the other side now. And I'm going to sample an area over here, still on a white neutral area. And when I click that, it goes down to 4950, which is very, very similar to my first point. So that's telling me that the white balance is pretty on point there. Now, if you found that the discrepancy was a pretty big range, you might want to try to sample a few more points and get the average from there. All right, so we adjusted our exposure and we checked our white balance and really warmed it up. And those two things, just by doing those, really made a difference already. The photo looks nice and bright and warm. The colors looked correct on it. I think it looks really nice. But there's a couple more things that you can do to really make your photo look great in your editing program. Let's make sure we've got it nice and sharp and clear. So you're going to want to choose the tab that is right under the histogram, and it's 3 tabs over. It looks like 2 triangles and it says detail. So we're going to click on that, and we're just going to move this first slider over, the sharpening slider, to give it a little bit of extra sharpness. Now, we don't want to go all the way over because that will look bad in print. So we just want to give it a little extra sharpness without going overboard. It's a very simple slider you can use that will make a big difference. Now, the final thing that helps with editing your portraits is the luminance slider. And you can grab that. It is the 4th button over under the histogram, and it says HSL Grayscale. So let's click that right there. And you're going to want to make sure your luminance tab is selected. Now, remember, if you're using Lightroom and not ACR, these same tabs will be there as well. You're going to want to focus on this orange slider. Now, what this orange slider will do is it's really going to focus on the skin of your portrait. It's either going to brighten it up or it's going to darken it a little bit. There's no magic number on this slider because it's really dependent on the individual and the subject and the skin tones of the subject that you're working with. But what I love about this slider is that it stays focused on the skin tones. So if we took this slider, watch what happens if I go all the way over to the right. You'll see it really brightened up his skin, but it didn't affect much of the other parts of the photograph. It stayed very central to the skin, which is what I love about this slider, is that we can make adjustments to our portrait without affecting much of the other parts. So what I'm going to do here is just take the slider and I'm going to move it up, not quite as much as I had it before, maybe to 17 or 18, just so it brightens up the skin a little bit more, but leaves the rest of the photo alone. And there you have it. Let's take a look at the original. So here is our final, just using the 4 sliders. And here was the beginning. So that really made a big difference in our photo. There, once again, just the 4 sliders we adjusted and the original. So if you're not sure where to start when it comes to editing, if you do those 4 things, you are on the right track for portrait editing. Now, once you bring it into Photoshop, there are a lot of things that you can do and you can get really creative, but don't overwhelm yourself just yet. Just focus on the exposure, the white balance, the sharpening, and the luminance. Those 4 things will really help you out. All right, so one of the biggest takeaways that I want you to leave with today after watching this workshop is that photography really is so much fun. And when you can lose that overwhelm and stop comparing yourself to others and just have fun, you will see results with your photography. But some of you might still feel like you're struggling a little bit. If you watched this and felt like, yeah, you know what, I do some of that already, or I try to apply some of that in my portraits, but I'm just not seeing them the way I want them to look yet, then the perfect portrait might be right for you. Now, what the perfect portrait is, it is a new online e-course that I've created to help you master portrait editing using Photoshop. Now, the perfect portrait e-course is not Photoshop actions or presets. This e-course is really an editing system to help you master portrait editing and really take control of your creativity. This course will help you with skin, so you will master tones, create softness, and get great dimension in your portraits. You'll also learn how to edit those details. So you'll master editing of eyes, hair, lips, cheeks, and more. Now, what you'll get with this e-course? There are 7 easy to follow and navigate learning modules. And within each module is a step-by-step video tutorial. So you get to see me in action apply these techniques. You also get a downloadable workbook. So you can download it, print it out, take notes, relearn, reread, and go back again and again. You'll also get lots of bonuses with this e-course today, since you were part of the Boost Your Portrait IQ workshop. Now, what you'll create once you go through this course, you will have a consistent style in your editing. You'll also learn beautiful skin toning. So if you've ever had someone tell you before, oh, there's too much magenta or there's not enough blue in your skin, now you'll know exactly how to fix that and figure out how to get skin tones correct from the beginning. You'll also learn how to master the enhanced details using Photoshop. Now, I want to share with you one of my students that went through the Perfect Portrait e-course the last time I had it opened. This is Kaylee Fisher, and she allowed me to share a before and after. But what I love about Kaylee was that what she told me about this e-course. She told me that this course really gave her confidence and a routine with her editing. And she said that with continued practice, she knows she's going to have consistency, which is something she's had such a hard time with before. So with this shot that she shared, she said there's no presets. She just followed exactly what was taught in the course. And she said the confidence this course gave her is just incredible. So Kaylee, thank you for sharing that with everybody. That puts a big smile on my face, and hopefully it puts a smile on yours too. Now, this course will also help you save time. So if you've been editing portraits and you find yourself taking 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, and then looking back and saying, oh, I don't like that at all, and having to start over again, this course will help you save time so you know exactly what to do. Now, if you remember, I did say there are bonuses that are attached to enrolling in this e-course. So because you are part of this online workshop today, you will also get a bonus module with helping prepare your raw file. So either in Lightroom or ACR, you'll learn exactly the steps and the sliders to use to prepare your photo to bring it into Photoshop. You're also going to get my bonus sharpening actions. These are Photoshop actions, and they're going to help you get your photo looking clear and sharp and crisp for both print and the web. You will also get access to a Facebook support group, which is new and private for students of this course only, which I love this group. This group is very small, it's very elite, and it's very non-threatening. So you can easily share and ask questions without feeling like you're going to be criticized. Now, this is not my photography support, learn, and inspire group with Cozy Clicks, which is a great group, but that group is at, I think, over 20,000 members now, which is an awesome place to learn, but can be super intimidating at times. So this group that you will have access to will be much smaller, and like I said, only course students, so you can feel a little more comfortable sharing your work in here. You're also going to get a bonus surprise goodie package because I love surprises. So when you complete the Perfect Portrait e-course, the final module will have something special there for you. Now, you might have a few questions about this e-course. What if you don't have Photoshop? Now, I talked about this a little earlier in the workshop, but if you're a serious hobbyist, if you're just starting out a portrait business or thinking about it, or if you've simply outgrown your current editing system, now may be the time to think about switching over to Photoshop Creative Cloud. It's going to give you a lot more creative control, and it's the perfect time once you enroll in this e-course to make the switch. It's going to help you out with learning how to use some of the functions in Photoshop. You might be wondering, okay, how long will this e-course take me? Well, it is completely up to you. It is 7 modules, and I have had students complete it all in one day. But I've also had students go through each module 1 week at a time and really try to soak everything in. Do you have limited access to the course? No, you have lifetime access. So you can go through the course and watch and rewatch as many times as you need to try to understand the content. You can also get into the course at your own time schedule. So if you like to do your work when the kids are in bed and you turn on your computer at midnight, you can do that. If you like to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and have a cup of coffee, you can watch the e-course then as well. It's completely on your own time. You also get to do the e-course in the comfort of your own home. So if you want to be in your pajamas, you can. All right, so now I know a big question is, how much will this course cost me? Well, this course is just a one-time payment of $149. It is not multiple payments. It's not a payment plan. It's not reoccurring payments. It's just one time, and you get lifetime access to all the modules, all the videos, the private support group, and the bonuses. Now, if you'd like to enroll, there is a link to the right-hand side. You can check that out and you can enroll right now. You can also go to cozyclicks.com/portrait and check out more on this e-course. Now, when you click that or when you go to sign up, you're going to see a page that looks kind of like this. It will have the Perfect Portrait at the top for $149, and you'll see the Cozy Clicks logo will also be at the top too. You can pay for this course either through credit card or through PayPal to make it really easy and flexible for you. Now, once you pay for the course, you will get an email with your login information. So whatever email you use when you sign up and whatever password you create, that's how you'll be able to get into the course. Once you do, you'll see the class curriculum that looks similar to this. So this is the first few modules, and you'll see those circles on the side. When you finish one of the modules, it will darken up so you'll always know exactly where you left off. So you can do this. If you want to set your portraits up right from the beginning, if you want to save yourself the time to learn exactly how to edit your portraits, and if you want to create portraits the way you've always wanted to create them, plus get in on all of those bonuses, this is for you. And I truly hope you learned something today from this course that you can take and start doing with your portraits. Thank you so much for watching and being part of the online workshop today. And like I said earlier, because you stayed to the end, you do get the Portrait IQ Toolbox from me. So make sure you check your email, and I'll have that sent out within the next hour. You should have that in your inbox. And once again, if you want to check out more information on the perfect portrait, you can do that right on the link to your right, or go to cozyclicks.com/portrait.